what's up, guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. We're going to be having a discussion about the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, otherwise known as NASA. And I know it's been an easy topic to pick on with many channels in alternative media covering the NASA lies and never a straight answer and all that stuff. But it's because, in fact, when you begin to uncover some of the connections between NASA and the occult, it becomes pretty obvious that they can't really be trusted. So the question becomes, how much of what they say can we believe, if at all? And is absolutely everything they say and everything they release publicly all a lie? Or is there a way we can gauge what they're actually doing as opposed to what they're saying? And, you know, what's spin, what's propaganda? And ultimately, what's their greater agenda? Why would they lie? What are they trying to cover up? So we're going to be tackling all those issues, but to get help, I have the crew of The Time Is Now. It's a new show on Blogtalkradio, and we have Charles Holler, Kenneth Beer, Jackie Evans, and Cathy Dunson. How are you guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing real fine. Thank you.
Great. Hi,
Great, super.
Gons.
Hey, Gons.
All right, you guys are all here. Welcome to YouTube.
Thank
You guys sound excited.
We are.
I am. It's a good topic, and it's a great group of people to be with.
Awesome. So to start off, we have a lot of people here, and I'm sure none of us fully agree with one another on every little detail of every topic concerning the Bible and Bible prophecy, but we can all pretty much agree that Yeshua, Jesus, is our Lord and Savior, and that we're here for means of fellowship and sharing knowledge and wisdom, especially concerning the times we're living in right now. And one of the big topics right now, especially, is NASA, because it really is a bridge, in my opinion, to all the things literally happening above us, quite literally. But at the same time, our faith, in which through the word reveals to us a lot of celestial events. And Jesus himself saying, when these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption draws near. And NASA is all about the stuff happening above us. So let's jump right in. Why can't we trust NASA? Can we start with Charles?
Well, I would think that the first time that, I noticed a lie was when our own government admitted it, and that was with the spy plane. When Gary Powers was shot down, up until then, they were very adamant that there was no spy planes, and we understand why they did it. That was for national security, but it also shows, who they are, and that they are willing, to put some lies in there. And if they're going to lie there, where are they going to stop with their lies?
Right. That's a good point. Kenneth, what do you think?
Yeah, they pile one upon the other. I have a technical background, and I was in graduate school, and you had to go jump through all the hoops, and there are certain things you have to do to qualify, and then you go through a proposal and a qualifying exam, and then you have your defense for a thesis. And I was into all that theoretical science and had to derive equations, and I saw problems. And when you challenge that sort of stuff, it would always have to, you'd have to brush it off. And I used to challenge my advisor and some of the people on my thesis committee, and they basically sat me down and said, if you don't do this, you're not going to graduate. So I basically had to swallow it by blind faith and move on. And then all these years later, I'm starting to dig into some of this, and it's like, aha, I had one of those Gestalt moments, as the Germans call it, an aha moment, where I started to realize those things that perplexed me nearly 30 years ago were actually, in fact, not because I didn't understand it, or not because I was stupid, but because the same elements that are in many in the religious community are condemned for, that is, believing in blind faith, those in quote unquote the scientific community, and NASA in particular, believe blindly. And one that came to my mind right away was some of the classical what are called the ether experiments from the 1800s. Michelson-Morley, Aries, and there were other ones where they tried to quantify and prove the motion of the Earth around the sun. Yet in every one of those instances, they'd come up with no motion, no movement. And it used to bother me, because I was a big fan of Maxwell, with the Maxwell equations, and it was stuff that related to the work I did. And I always used to think, boy, I'm just not getting this. I really just don't understand it. And as I start to dig into these things, I start to realize that what these scientists do is they merge or confuse experimental science with theoretical science, and every theoretical science, including Newton's Principia, begins with one word, if. So this 500-page tome written by Newton begins with the word if. And then upon that foundation of sand, the entire discipline is built. And if you question that if, that assumption, you're basically told what I was told. So I see that in most of the work they do, and it's alarming. And we could get into specifics if we have the time, but that's kind of what did it for me, one of those Gestalt aha moments.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially since, you know, you had talked about in your last episode on The Time Is Now, you guys were talking about science versus scientism. And, you know, it really makes sense that, you know, it is pretty much a religious sort of atmosphere where they're really, there's a priesthood, you know, they have their white robes. It's kind of an interesting thing when you start looking into it. But let's keep going here because we got other people. Jackie. What do you think?
I think that when I first started to kind of open my eyes to everything, one of the first things that came up was, you know, just looking into some of the truther videos and different things was just simply about the moon landing. And just the concept in my head that this possibly, probably, or it absolutely did not happen. And the fact that not just the whole United States, but the whole world was given into this and accepted it, and really with no question or anything. And whenever, like I say, proposed that to my husband, he would instantly say, well, there's pictures, you know, we went to the moon. So it's just an unbelief to me how willing everyone is to believe. Even with seeing some of the other, you know, things that are out there disproving this, you were still on the attack for trying to prove that it's right or not right. Right. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. And a lot of times, you know, it's hard to, especially later as we question these things, you know, decades later, a lot of what, you know, our elders, maybe our parents, stuff like that, they experienced, maybe some of you guys too, have lived through some of that, and you have memories of it. You have, you know, it's part of your lives. It was part of growing up. And at that point in time, with a lot of the, you know, moon landings and stuff like that, television was very much, you know, a singular entity, so to speak. You know, it wasn't just a mass media like it is now. So the whole world was captivated, you know, and it was much more easy to tell one big lie than to, you know, try to manage this, you know, the truthers and everything that's happening now, where it's a lot of different opinions. But Cathy, what about you?
Well, I remember where I was when they landed on when they supposedly landed on the moon. I'm sure many in our audience weren't even born yet. So there aren't many experiences throughout your life that stand out so clearly and precisely as something like that. I mean, I remember I was laying on the floor looking at the TV, you know, one of those big console TVs. So yeah, I never even questioned it. And lately, the past several years now, I've been doing research for some online radio programs and for our Facebook presence. And one of those aspects of the research has been to look at the signs. And like you were saying, looking at the sun, looking at heavenly bodies, and it was just a foundational understanding that I never questioned. I didn't even question the moon landing until the last 12 months. It was actually, I heard on Canary cry. I heard Bart Sibrel. Oh, wow. And then I came home after, I listened to podcasts while I worked, and I came home and I watched that. And that was it, Gons. You did it.
Oh, gosh. I get that a lot. It's your fault.
That was the first that I had even questioned it. But one thing I wanted to point out, another foundational understanding, I didn't even think of it as a belief, but it was, was the sun and the images that we see. And it's only recently that I've come to understand that they're composites, and many things are not even an actual image, but they say, and I'm not even sure if that is truth, but they say that there are wavelengths and things that they pick up that are non-visible. We've got to trust them. They've got the magic cameras that translate these blips, like the new discovery supposedly of the gravitational wave. They see a blip off trillions of light years away, and voila, they now have this discovery. But I came to understand this is the same thing of the sun. Now, in the past, I would start my day with a certain YouTube channel looking at what's going on with the sun. And I would think, wow, isn't that something that we're getting this image off the SOHO or the SDO satellite cameras? And I never questioned that. But I came across an article that's talking about, and I love the way they word this. It's very typical of things that you find where they're trying to create a mindset. And it says, as you would imagine, let's start off that way. If you took a normal photo of the sun with your camera, you wouldn't see much detail beyond a yellow circle. And you think, well, yeah, that's what we do see. And then they go on to explain how it's non-visible wavelengths that they have a team of people going in and creating. So what you see with the sun image going around and all the flares is a creation, and they call it thermonuclear art. And this latest eclipse of the sun with the moon, I found a European Space Agency video that shows the moon skipping around. It's a 2-minute video, shows the moon skipping around, yet the sun doesn't move at all. There's no movement of the flares. There's no turning of the sun. And so these are the curtains being drawn back to reveal this is what is actually going on. But yet we've accepted it. We haven't questioned it. We've just accepted it. And there's a whole lot more there that is not what we've been led to believe. So that's a big one with the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I often wake up really early. My dogs wake me up at around 4:30, and I take him out on a walk. And it's a good opportunity. I'm usually half the time I don't know what's going on because I'm half asleep. But I look up and I see the stars. And for example, this morning I looked up and I have a little app on my phone. It's called the Sky View, and it shows you the constellations. And, you can actually hold it up to the sky and it'll tell you kind of what you're looking at. And, there was allegedly there was Saturn, there's Mars right next to the constellation Scorpio, and there's Jupiter. And then I took the thing down and I was kind of looking at it like, really is just a little bit of a tinted colored light, don't really know what's going on. Now we know the movements that we can observe from here. But yeah, you're right that we're really trusting instruments. We have these instruments that allegedly, measures things. And, to some aspects, it's like, okay, maybe at a smaller scale on Earth, it works, but there's no proof that, no one's been out there trillions of miles, if that's really the case of what's happening. So, and plus, if you're looking at something like space, which I sort of, I kind of make the analogy to water. And I spent a lot of time in water growing up. So I have kind of a weird perspective on, stuff like space, because when I see some of the allegedly space, footage, it looks like they're underwater. And that's a whole nother thing I know that people are skeptical about to begin with. But, in the medium of water, light doesn't really do the same thing. If you shine a light into water, it diffuses, it changes, So in that sense, space could be a similar thing, the water separated by water. And I'm not saying that space is water, but it could be something where, our instruments are measuring certain things. Yeah, what appear to be certain things, but it may not be exactly what's going on. Allegedly, no one's really been out past, I guess, the moon, if you want to say that, if you want to believe that story. But what other sort of specific details, maybe Charles, we can just go through the same order, or whoever wants to jump on it. Specific details have compelled you to think, okay, this is something that NASA is definitely lying. There's good reason to believe they're lying. And then ultimately, why would they lie about this particular thing?
Well, as Cathy was talking about Hollywood, Hollywood, it's all about the money. And of course, when the NASA film was first shown of the first man supposedly walking on the moon, I was 9 years old. Well, almost 9. I was 8. And of course, we didn't have the ability to record our television shows back then. We were probably 11, 12 years away from getting our first VCR. And I think it was Rob Scuba whose father had the insight to actually have a camera and take multiple snapshots of the television screen as it was showing it, which would be nice to have. But, if you think back, let's say World War II. Okay, we're in the middle of World War II, and Hollywood makes 20, 30 movies about World War II before the war is even over. Now, this, of course they would. It's a major event. Well, how much more of a major event would the moon landing be? And yet, try to find a movie about it. So Ron Howard, who came the closest with Apollo 13, but they just barely got out of orbit with that particular movie. When he went back a few years ago to NASA to try to get the original footage, because he wanted to do a movie, all of a sudden the footage was all gone. It had disappeared. And in 30 days, the only thing that you could look at that footage on, the camera that they had for that type of film, they dismantled it. And that just screams red flags everywhere.
Yeah, that's pretty suspicious, especially since, the rumors of certain movie producers helping in the project and then a movie producer wanting to take a look at it. That could be revealing, to someone who has an eye to look for details in the filming that might give away that it's not legitimate. So that's a good point. Anybody else? Kenneth, you want to go next?
Yeah, I can share a similar experience to what Charles had. About the same age, we're seated around our first color console. It was an RCA, and we watched it, and we were all excited. And then a few years later, my parents said, let's all make a trip to Washington, D.C., and we visited the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and I got to see a couple of the artifacts, so to speak. I got to see the re-entry vehicle, the Apollo 11 command module. It's in the lobby. And I looked at it, and, it had some scars on it from travel and all that neat stuff. And what got me, and what really, this is back as a child now, Guns. I'm this child, and I go over to the LEM 2. It's in the court area right before you go outside. And I looked at this thing, and it looked like something you would put together for a high school science project. And here I am, a young teenager, and I'm standing there looking at that thing, thinking, that thing was on the moon? I don't believe it. But then I couldn't say that. So then you have to repress that for all these years, okay? And then I started to do some work with William Cooper back in the 90s, and he did a series from a book called NASA Mooned America by a guy named Rene. And all of a sudden I realized I wasn't alone. There are other people that are questioning this. But then when you stop and think about it, they claim with 1960s technology to have traveled 250,000 miles. Yet today, when they took the space shuttle up to 300 miles, they got into all sorts of problems and had to go back to their normal orbital height of 150 miles. So you have a technology that's advanced by multiple generations, miniaturization of computers, advanced hydraulics and electronics and everything else you need to make a mission like that possible, and yet they have a limit, an operational limit of between 150 and 300 miles. So they, with ancient technology, in terms of technology, were able to go 166.666 times further. I just find that curious. And, it's like, well, why haven't we done it again?
Hey, Kenneth, whenever you said that, I just thought, well, they probably haven't done it again because their technology is now a lot of our technology, and they probably wouldn't be able to get away with it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they would probably get busted. So they probably just, back then, they're people, you had your eyes, and maybe you had a camera that wasn't very good, and you didn't have the internet or other places to gather to talk about these things. So they probably wouldn't be able to get away with it now.
And then amplifying what Charles said, all of the film footage from these Apollo missions were recorded over. The most important scientific event in the history of the world, and you recorded over the masters?
Yeah.
Give me a break, folks.
They should have put those into the same vault where the Ark of the Covenant wound up, Indiana Jones.
Oh, what a joke. What a joke. And the reason I believe they did that is because now we have enough video and digital technology to go back and debunk it.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I think we got Zen on the line here. Zen, are you there?
I am. Thanks for being patient with me.
Oh, it's cool.
And I apologize, I wasn't ready to begin with.
It's all good. I'm glad you can make it. We were just, obviously we're talking about NASA lies, so we'll just throw it right to you since you jumped in, and then we can go to Cathy. But share some of your thoughts.
Well, in doing some of the research just on the Van Allen radiation belts and how even with the Orion project, they are having difficulties in trying to go beyond and looking past it as far as protecting the astronauts. Supposedly during the Apollo missions, all that had been taken care of, and they were, back then successful in sending people to the moon and going beyond these Van Allen radiation belts without any problem. And in doing, research now and looking into that, NASA has debunked themselves and bringing forth the difficulties of dealing with this as a problem for today's missions as far as the Orion project and sending people to Mars. And so if they weren't able to do it now, most certainly they weren't able to do it then. And so they kind of just shot themselves in the foot when they, when they asserted that they were having these difficulties. And I read somewhere else in researching the Van Allen radiation belts that for astronauts, there was a Russian study that talked about how there would need to be 4 feet of lead surrounding the astronauts in order to protect them from instant death in just going across the barrier. And so, that's totally inconceivable, because if they were to incorporate even that much lead on the craft, not even just the spacesuits themselves, there would be no way that they could achieve the altitude or getting past the atmosphere of the Earth to actually reach and to go beyond into outer space to access the moon or Mars or wherever it is that they were wanting to go.
Right. That's interesting. And do you think maybe that there's a difference between just sending a probe up there or sending people up there? Obviously the story is that the probes have gone much further, and I remember a couple years ago they said that we're exiting the solar system, all kinds of stuff floating around. What about that? Do you think there's something there, or do you think it's just the manned mission to Mars they're lying about?
I think that we really have to reassess and to reevaluate everything that we believe as far as achievement from NASA, just because, again, in their own studies, they've talked about the excessive temperatures that exist in the thermosphere and the, even further beyond that, where they supposedly have all of these satellites, and with the kind of materials that these satellites are made up of and composed of, it should not be achievable for them to be in orbit around the Earth without any kind of difficulty. With the extremes of temperature, both night and day, being exposed directly to the sun's light and being heated up excessively, it should melt the gold and the other materials that are so malleable, and also fry the solar panels and the other the other electrical circuitry. And so how all these satellites are up there and they've never have any problems, none of them ever run into each other, how they don't smash into the International Space Station. I mean, are they monitoring? Are they keeping track of all of these, and how how all of these things are not considered when supposedly the different Apollo missions, or even the Orion missions, or whatever missions that they are planning to send up. First, just the difficulty of maintaining these satellites, or any structure or any kind of probe that is being sent out there. Even with the own scientific studies that have come out, just in the variations and the extremes in temperature, and also the radiation from the three barriers of the Van Allen radiation belts, it makes you wonder if what they are talking about and what they have spoken of as already achieving, if that is indeed possible, especially when you look at the kinds of components and the things that satellites are made of. They should melt, or at least have a difficult time of being up there and being maintained in orbit around the Earth. And so it makes me wonder, and I'm still learning and reassessing now that I've determined that NASA does not in any way deserve the benefit of the doubt when it comes to their assertions and their supposed accomplishments.
Kathy, your thoughts?
Well, talking too about the satellites that are supposedly orbiting the Earth. I mean, sometimes you never see satellites from the ISS. I did find one place where there was supposedly a picture taken by probably Scott Kelly, and it showed two satellites that looked like a painting. It didn't look. It's the only time I've seen an actual satellite supposedly in space. So they're I think they're trying to counter what is coming out in discussion now. People are able to look at this closer, and they're questioning more and more about NASA. For instance, last July, the new image of the blue marble supposedly came out, and this was the first time since 1972 that they'd even attempted to do that. And they also had, it was the Discover, that's the acronym, satellite that's supposedly 1 million miles away, taking this image, I say image, of the moon transiting the Earth, and it looked like the moon did a flyby.
Yeah, I've seen that. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first thing they do since 1972. It looks like, in response. And if you go on Twitter where they post their picture, people are just buying it. They believe it. I don't understand how they don't see that. And someone came out recently, made a very good point that the sun is supposed to be shining, or is supposed to be shining on the Earth past the moon. You can see the Earth is bright from that, but the moon is a dull gray, and we are used to looking up at the moon when it's supposedly illuminated by the sun, and it's real bright, luminous, sparkly looking, and that wasn't the case at all in this. One other thing I wanted to point out about press releases, information, every day something new is coming out from NASA. I mean, they just recently did the gravitational wave, and that's been since Einstein. They've been trying to prove that. But a new thing came out the other day. It's supposed to be the biggest structure in the universe they've discovered, and they've called it Boss Wall. I don't know if you saw this one, Gons, because you kind of follow that stuff. To me, that was just amazing. They said the Boss Great Wall is an immense complex comprising more than 800 galaxies and weighing 10,000 times as much as the Milky Way. How do they know this stuff? These are the same people, and I imagine most people don't know this because I didn't. We've only drilled, the deepest in the Earth is 7.5 miles. That's as deep as we've gone. But yet I've got another article here in front of me that says exactly how much the core of the sun weighs, and all these different weights of the planets, and they do that with the Cavendish experiment too, lead balls in a shed, and people don't understand this. I know I didn't question, but as you start digging in, and there's so many things, I think that in itself is daunting. There's just so many things. It's absurd. Every single thing where I've drilled down, I haven't found truth. I have found a foundation. Back to Hipparchus. I found foundationalized where he said it had to be very distant, that the universe that they wanted to imagine was distant, was just far, far, far. So they've just built on that with, another fiction on top of another fiction. And if you try and peel any part of it away, you come up with things that are absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it's kind of like evolution. You have time and chance, and you have us. Wow, and then for space, it's like, there's distance and mass or gravity or whatever, and there you have it. We have millions of trillions of miles of space. It's just very interesting.
Lots of math.
Yeah, lots of math.
and lots of math. That's to disguise it all.
Well, we've all looked up into the sky at night, and we've seen those blinking little lights, and they change colors, and they're moving around. And we've always assumed they're satellites. Yet, when you think about it, a 747 at 40,000 looks like a small dot. And so these objects that are supposed to be a third of that size, 200 miles into the sky, we wouldn't even see them. And, and going with that, I challenge anybody listening out there, the next time you go to an observatory and they ask you, do you want us to look at something? Have them pointed at the moon. Say, let's look at the Sea of Tranquility. Let's take a look at the flag. Let's take a look at some of the things that were left. They'll never do it. They'll never do it.
Right.
Charles, I find most of the pictures, because I've really tried to find some pictures of stars at observatories. Most of the pictures at observatories are of staff.
Okay. Okay,
Smiling
there you
people.
go.
Yeah. And they're happy.
There has been a new turn in technology. I'm not sure exactly all of the specifications, but the new Nikon P900 cameras, they are taking images of pictures of planets and video of planets and stars and showing these twinkling, brilliant images that are just amazing looking. So there's something going on there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I have a question about, and whoever wants to answer it, I've really looked at the space wars that is pretty much on the verge here. There's been news recently about China and their satellites up in space, North Korea, flying a satellite over with a nuke on it. The geopolitical aspect of it is starting to tie into space, which is part of the reason why I think there might be something going on, some sort of, whether it be exactly how we have been told or not, regardless, I feel like there's something that's happening above us that they have some sort of control over, because if the problem with a lot of the space war type stuff is until we see like a legitimate demonstration by a nation, which, unfortunately, some of the rumors are, there's an EMP that can go off over the United States. And if that happens, well, there you have it. Something came down, But even prophetically speaking, I look at Revelation 13, I look at the second half, and I see the second beast calling fire down from heaven in the sight of men. And, perhaps the whole setup of this supernatural event is, it was just technology, so there could be that sort of thing going on. But what are your thoughts on that? I know NASA is hard to trust, but, there's other agencies out there. Is it all corrupt? Are they all telling lies about what's going on above us?
Yeah, what I see, and this is so disturbing. You have the high priests of the pop sciences, you want to call it. We have Bill Nye, the science guy, and we have the esteemed physicist Neil Tyson with his own talk show, and now he's having it out with Bob Rapp, the rapper Bob. But he's been on many interviews where he tells us how the Earth, with that sophisticated tone that he uses, how we don't have a sphere. It's actually an ellipsoidal,
like a pear shape or something, right?
Pear shape. But then every image you look at out there is perfectly round. So one or the other's lying. And then there's a clip that's out there now, released from the Apollo 13 mission, where they show them setting up the image that they, quote unquote, took, that was then a derivative or a source document for the source image for the blue marble. But it was
Apollo 11.
Yeah, 11, that's it, yeah. Framing the image in a blacked out window.
Right, exactly.
And there's a couple instances where they didn't have it right, and you could see the inside of the window frame, and then they shifted away. The one time you could see the one astronaut's arm. It's a joke. They were, if anything, in low orbit. They weren't 160,000 miles away from Earth when they took this picture.
Right.
So that's one thing that bothers me. And then another thing, if I could just read a real short quote out of 1984. So this was written many years ago, but I think George Orwell summed it all up here, where he said, "What are the stars?" And this is O'Brien, the interrogator of Winston talking. "What are the stars?" said O'Brien indifferently. "They are bits of fire. They are bits of fire a few kilometers away. We could reach them if we wanted to, or we could blot them out. The Earth is the center of the universe. The suns and the stars go round it. When we navigate the ocean, or when we predict an eclipse, we often find it convenient to assume that the Earth goes round the sun and that the stars are millions upon millions of kilometers away. But what of it? Do you suppose it's beyond us to produce a dual system of astronomy? The stars can be near or distant according as we need them. Do you suppose our mathematicians are unequal to that? Have you forgotten doublethink?" And I think he summed it all up right there.
Wow. I remember that too. We had to read 1984 in high school. I had a pretty interesting English teacher where we read Brave New World and 1984 back to back. So I had an interesting high school experience there. But anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's amazing, even because I studied 1984 and also Brave New World, but I didn't remember reading that particular portion. And it's so interesting how even in looking back at the gospel, how a lot of things that never stood out to me now do, since I've looked into and understood that NASA has perpetuated a hoax for a very long time. And even like in looking into the Apollo 11 with them fabricating the shape of the Earth by utilizing that window, if they're having to hoax it in order to bring forth and to support the ideology of the Earth as being a sphere, why are they having to hoax that if indeed the case is that the Earth is a globe or an oblate spheroid, as Neil Tyson says? If it's just that, why can't they just turn the satellites and all these different and even have a 24-hour website where you can go to and just look at the Earth in all of its glory as these satellites are moving over the face of it? There should be multiple sites like this, and there should be in existence hundreds of thousands of images and videos of the Earth and where we live from all angles, and centered. We should be able to look down at our houses and our states and our counties and different places at all times and be able to zoom out and see the Earth in its glory. I mean, that's the kind of technology that they claim to have, and yet because these kind of things don't exist, it's made me wonder. And then looking at the real science as far as the different experiments that have done which confirm that the Earth is stationary, fixed, and unmoving, as it says within the scriptures and as the gospel asserts. Well, then, if the Earth is unmoving and it's not spinning on an axis once every 24 hours, and neither is it spinning annually around the sun, well, then that totally negates the whole heliocentric worldview that we've been indoctrinated into and have been taught since elementary school. And if that truly is the case, well, then what is the truth of where we are, who we are, and what is going on all around us? Because certainly if, as Dr. Sungenis in his book Geocentrism 101, and even the cosmic background, the radiation shows that the Earth is the focal point, is the center of the manifest universe. And if that is the case, well, then most certainly we have a lot of reconsideration as far as truth and reassessment to make and to do in figuring out what exactly is going on, and why, if that is the case, why NASA and the other space agencies, because they also would have to be in on it in order to perpetuate and to support such a web of deceit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, actually, I know that I don't know the exact details. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I do recall that it was somebody within NASA early on, I think during maybe Jet Propulsion Laboratory days, who left and did go to China to start the Chinese space agency. So there's some connection there. What do you guys think we could expect to see in the next, 6 months to a year, whether it be, because I think this whole thing has a potential to tie into the whole ancient aliens propaganda, the alien deception, all that stuff. What do you think we're going to see in the next, again, 6 months to a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever? Do you think that NASA, for example, the movie Interstellar, which was an interesting, sort of propaganda piece for multidimensional string theory and stuff like that, but also outer space and wormhole travel and stuff like that. They suggested that, it's in the future, and NASA has been totally defunct because, all the stuff was faked, and it came out that it was all faked, and that's what the public consensus was. Do you think there's going to be a shift or some sort of call for the truth that, at a certain point, it's the people are going to really ask for what's really going on, and they get some level of truth back? Or do you think it's going to perpetuate and we're going to see some bizarre things fulfilled?
Well, Gons, there's a paper out that it's been debunked, but it's called The Report from Iron Mountain, and the way they propose to continue after wars on Earth become unproductive or inefficient in terms of keeping people occupied, we're going to have a threat from outer space. So I certainly think that's a possibility, but you have to keep the people afraid, and you have to keep the people... I noticed this like in the current presidential campaign. There's always a comment in the top 2 or 3 purposes or planks of their platform, they're why I should be president. I just heard Hillary say this the other day, to keep America safe. Well, you know what? I don't want them to keep me safe. I'll take care of that myself. That's not their job. Their job is to protect my liberties and my property.
Right.
That's all they are. And when they try to do anything that I can't ask another person to do legally and lawfully, then they're outside of the bounds of a just government. So I think what they're going to try to do is instill fear in the people and say, we need to take more from you, and we need to suppress more of your freedoms and your liberties so that we can do this. And of course, the drive is a one world government with Lucifer himself on top. He'll seat his Antichrist, he's the ape of God. And I really think that's what they're trying to angle for here. And there's a Jesuit connection that goes way back to the times of Copernicus. And I just want to throw this out to everybody to amplify what Zen talked about. If you haven't seen the movie The Principle, it's really worth seeing. Dr. Sungenis produced that with a couple other top-notch video documentarians. And this is an excellent movie. It kind of puts it all together. And they quote Einstein in there. And the question was, what if those experiments of Michelson-Morley were correct? Then the entire area of quantum mechanics and the theories of special and general relativity fall flat in their face. And then everything we talk about, wormholes, portals, all that stuff, it's nil, because it isn't the appropriate theory. So they have created an illusion, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain. That's my opinion. And I think they're going to try to do it to establish a one-world government and seat Lucifer at the throne.
Well, I see it go. I see it going one of 2 ways. Either they're going to lock this thing down and shut it down, or they're going to have to create a lie to tell why they were lying. Because I've never seen anything unravel so quick in the last 18 months as this whole, anti-NASA geocentrism. I mean, and I don't think they ever expected the tsunami of technology and sharing of information among the common people to happen so quick. And so it's bound to continue unraveling until someone has to step forth will that be our next president? I don't know. You know, you've got a guy running right now who, for some reason, is bolder than most Christians and is bold enough to step up and say, you know, where is your birth certificate? I mean, what else is he going to, you know, what other truths, if he gets into office, is he going to expose? So interesting times we live in. Just to quote a friend of mine who went on to be with the Lord last year, when I think of NASA, I just want to say, were you lying then or are you lying now?
Good stuff.
I think as far as the strong delusion and the ancient alien and the whole thing that is being perpetuated and pushed by the History Channel, that this is the next part in the end game, and that science and even all the scientists and astrophysicists, they are going to push that the reason we cannot find a missing link and the reason we are not able to locate this ancestor that links humanity with that of the apes is because of the interdiction of the ancient aliens, and that they are the creators of modern humanity, and that this is the reason why we're not able to find, because all of a sudden they either genetically experimented or involving themselves directly through bestiality, whatever it is, whatever theory they perpetuate, that this will be the neoteric theology that replaces Darwinism. It will be a more advanced form of Darwinism, and it will also assert that the ancient aliens are the creators of humanity, and that there's so many that are willing to bow down and that believe in the Sumerian mythology, that, and also that science, that have bought into the Darwinian and heliocentric worldview, that do not believe in intelligence design, do not believe in a grand designer, a creator, nor that humanity was made in the image of the creator, but in the image of the ancient aliens, and that Earth is not special, that there's many different Earths out there, and there's many different planetary systems, and as long as one of these planets just happens to be extant in the perfect place, the Goldilocks zone, that life could randomly come about and be replicated as we see surrounding us here in this special place, which the science is asserting that Earth is not special at all, and neither is humanity, and that there does not, as Hawking says, there does not need to be a God or a creator, but that everything just could come about of random chance, which we know to be a lie. But it is my opinion that that is the next step in this whole paradigm, and as far as the scientism as religion.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they connect it to the ancient Sumerian literature, almost as if Satan kind of knew that there would be an alternative cosmology that would sort of take over at the end. So I think that's interesting. Jackie?
I just want to agree with what everyone else has said, and that I really don't think that most of the people on this earth want to know really what's happening. I think they are happy just being blind, and that they are not going to believe that there are people who actually rule this whole earth.
Yeah, and it's the book by Neil Postman. The title is so perfect because amusing ourselves to death, right? The public discourse in the age of show business, and he talks about comparing 1984 and Brave New World and how there's elements of both, but that Huxley may have been a little more right in terms of we're sort of entertained to oblivion, which is kind of what we're seeing, and even our worldviews are being shaped by that. But Cathy, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Sure. And I will heartily agree with everything that was just said. I do think we'll see a continuation from NASA to flood the public with propaganda. Propaganda is legal in the United States now. Thank you, Barack Obama. And I don't see a lot of pushback from people because we try and share this information as often as we can. I think the programming is so inculcated that people don't want to see it, and then they willingly fight back and will push the information and not go to learn for themselves, which is very sad to see. I mean, perhaps there'll be more of an awakening, but I think back to 9/11, to the many false flags we've seen, even with the government admitting to doing false flags, then that's there, it's part of history. People don't want to know. So I think that's what we'll be seeing. But we will be looking at prophecy, and we'll be looking for our Savior's return whenever that will be.
Amen. And the time is now. Is that, do you guys have a schedule? How often are you guys on?
No, I'll jump in. Okay, we do it bi-weekly, and it's a forum, just kind of like what we did here, Gons. We play some clips on the topic, and our next show is going to be episode 4 next week, NASA, fact, fiction, or faith, and we're going to cover basically the topics that we discussed here in some more depth, have some clips, just dive a little deeper into what we talked about here, and we're going to start with what NASA's agenda is supposed to be in the eyes of the public, and then all these lies, and then tie into the occult connection. So I think it's going to be a real good show. We just cover all of these end-time type issues that many people, quite frankly, are afraid to touch. So we just share it. We use the Holy Spirit as our guide, and we stand together in Christian fellowship, and we're all there, including Brother Zen. So praise the Lord. It's been fun, and I just hope we can carry it on by the grace of God and open up people's minds by the agency of the Holy Spirit. And that's my goal. That's my purpose. Just get people awakened to the lateness of this hour and how important it is to turn their eyes to Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And just
go ahead.
A quick plug. The next show is on the 22nd of March, and that's at 4:30 Eastern Time, 3:30 Central, 1:30 Pacific. So it's blogtalkradio.com. Broken, as in Brother Ken, is this the head station. So just for those who want to hear it live, Ken, you have the phone number they can call in and listen to it on the telephone live?
Let's see. I don't have it up right now. You just go to Broken on Blog Talk, and it'll show you that contact info. You could listen live with the call-in number.
You can always follow us on Tribulation Now Facebook, because I'll be posting it too.
Cool.
And that phone number is 213-559-2997. So you can just call in on your telephone and listen to it live.
Awesome. So Charles, Ken, Jackie, Cathy, Zen, thank you so much for jumping on here with the YouTube family. And hopefully some of you guys watching will go check out The Time Is Now. And do you guys have a chat room in there too, or is it just the audio?
Yeah, we do have a chat room.
Very cool.
We love to have people join. Yeah, we have a nice fellowship. So please come and join us.
So that was my conversation with the cast from The Time Is Now. And I apologize for Zen's audio. It was a little bit shaky. I did my best to try to clean it up. But in any case, I just want to remind you guys that I didn't agree with everything that was brought up in the discussion. But, I'm open to hearing people and what their thoughts are and why they believe it. And I always like hearing people that have different opinions, because I think it allows me to understand where they're coming from and to get a deeper understanding of my own beliefs. So in that sense, it's great. And then iron sharpening iron, we can compare notes and we can grow together as we gain more understanding about the Word of God and the times we're living in. So I encourage that. Check out the show. Hope you guys have an awesome day. God bless.